the Washington Post and a CBS News political contributor. Good to see you, Ed.
Good to see you, Vlad. Happy Friday.
Happy Friday. So, Speaker Ryan also said this week that they are close to a health care deal. Do we know what's in it?
We know that there is a compromise between those sort of Main Street, business-oriented Republican members and the Freedom Caucus, those ardent conservatives from across the country, that essentially would keep or allow states to keep the most popular aspects of the Affordable Care Act in place, things like allowing people up to 26 years of age to stay on their parents' plan, making sure there aren't problems for people with pre-existing conditions, but then essentially put it in the laps of states to determine whether or not they want to opt out of other parts of the law. Remember, part of the reason that there's a push to do this is not only because, as you said, the president is coming up short when it comes to legislative accomplishments, but also because some of the savings that they would like to see take place would be required in order to really move ahead with tax reform, which really is kind of the holy grail for at least congressional Republicans this year, something they really want to do. By eliminating a bunch of taxes, it brings down the costs of the government and would allow the math to work out in their favor, essentially. So we'll see. The idea that they're going to do this, however, in about 36 hours next week is, come up with an adjective, Vlad. It's improbable.
Well, improbable
because you need more time. And while you may be circulating the legislation this week while lawmakers are scattered across the country, the same concerns that they had before are likely to still be there for many of these members who have just spent 2 weeks back at home hearing from constituents who either like or didn't like what Republicans were trying to do the first time around.
Yeah, look, I get that the Trump administration would like to show some significant progress on this front, something that the president campaigned on. Many Republicans spent the last 7 years saying that once they were able to control the White House, control both houses of the Congress, that they were going to get this done. But I wonder, can they afford another failure on this? What are the optics going to look like if they can't get this done, Ed?
That's part of the reason why I don't think it's going to happen, Vlad, because to do that with just days to go before the 100-day mark, when, as the president says, people will be focused on it, I think would be a bit of a setback and really just cause another round of questions about the relationship between the White House and Congress, the fate of Speaker Ryan, the fate of Reince Priebus, and all the other aides at the White House who are helping the president out on this stuff. The other more immediate issue is that funding for the government expires a week from today. And there have been conversations going on between House and Senate negotiators over putting together some kind of plan that would take the government all the way through the end of the fiscal year in September. That is what congressional leaders expect it to spend next week doing, because the Senate gets back Monday night, the House doesn't get back till Tuesday, it only leaves a few days. If there's any delay in that, it means they're going to have to pass one of those short-term stopgap plans, maybe only of a week in length, to then allow them to come back to this after they have another acrimonious fight in the House over health care. So we'll see. The problem here, Vlad, is once again the White House is trying to dictate terms to Congress. Be you a Democratic or Republican president, that doesn't ever seem to work. It didn't work this time when the Republican White House was telling Republicans in Congress to vote for this plan, and it may not work again next week if the White House is begging for this.
Yeah.
Certainly you can understand why they want this win, but I just don't see it happening necessarily.
And let's talk about that budget deal. I mean, the budget director, Mick Mulvaney, says money for the border wall has got to be a part of this spending bill. Will Republican lawmakers get on board with even that? That's something that was what sort of gave Donald Trump his rise to prominence.
Oh, it's a marquee campaign pledge, absolutely, and he hasn't delivered on it yet. Look, some Republican lawmakers would sign on to that plan, but many would not. Notably, many of them in border states like Texas, Arizona, New Mexico have concerns about this, both in implementation and in the cost. I remember having a conversation a few weeks ago with Senator Jeff Flake of Arizona, the Republican, who said, I got no problem with a border wall plan since the president seems to think that Mexico is going to pay for it. And he kind of laughed and he looked at me and he said, that they're not. So we've got to come up with a way to do that. And he doesn't understand how you would justify the cost. And he's one of those fiscal conservatives, also happens to be from a border state. There are a lot of other fiscal conservatives who are concerned about this. And Democrats have made clear they would vote against any spending plan that has that funding in it. It is likely, In the House, you might need some Democratic votes, and you would definitely need them in the Senate. There are not 8 Democratic senators who support spending money on a new wall along the Mexican border. You need 60 senators in order to get something like this passed, a spending bill. Republicans have 52 plus 8, you would get to 60. There aren't 8 Democrats who support it. In fact, most, if not all, Democratic senators would probably vote against that kind of a plan, and that would spark a shutdown. So we'll see. I know that House and Senate negotiators have been working on a plan, mostly with the White House out of the way. They got involved again this week, making the request that Mulvaney did. And again, the same lesson we talked about before. When the White House starts dictating terms to Congress, things get tricky, and we'll see whether or not we have a plan in place by next Friday.
Ed, before we go, I want to get a little bit more, dig a little deeper into the significance of the 100 days. I looked at this 538.com blog. They had a graph that showed the number of bills passed into law by presidents past. And of course, the champion is Franklin Roosevelt. No one will ever achieve what he was able to achieve in the first 100 days of his presidency. 76 bills passed into law there. We were suffering one of the greatest crises of the country's history, perhaps save the Civil War. Harry Truman, 55. Dwight Eisenhower, 22. JFK, 26. In sort of the modern era, Jimmy Carter, 22. Ronald Reagan, 9. H.W. Bush, 18. Bill Clinton, 24. George W. Bush, 7. Barack Obama, 11. The president is trying to downplay the importance of the first 100 days. But back in October, he tweeted a list of what he'd accomplished, including tax relief, repealing and replacing Obamacare, cleaning up Washington corruption, ending illegal immigration. Does this milestone matter to Republicans, and does it matter more importantly to the people who voted for Donald Trump?
We don't know, I don't think, until really next week or the next few weeks when polling gets done, whether his supporters really do care. But for the president to say it doesn't matter, having tweeted all that back in the day, is trying to sort of once again rewrite what he has said in the past. So every White House since Franklin Roosevelt, frankly, has sort of scoffed at this 100-day mark, and I think that's, frankly, a fair thing to do. And Republican leaders on the Hill have said, look at us after 200 days, which essentially would be at the end of July as you head into the summer recess. That, I think, at this point is a more realistic thing, because if you haven't by then dealt with immigration, healthcare reform, or tax reform, then what on earth might this Congress do this year? That would remain a big open question. Look, he has successfully rolled back some Obama-era policies, as was the plan. He has installed a conservative justice to the Supreme Court in Neil Gorsuch. He has taken steps through his own executive power to start making other changes in regards to immigration and healthcare and other matters at the White House without Congress's help. By my count before the recess, Vlad, Congress had passed 22 bills. They had done things like rename VA hospitals, give thanks to veterans of the first Gulf War, rolled back billions of dollars, Republicans say, in Obama-era regulations. And of course, most of his cabinet was confirmed. So there is modest success in the first 100 days. But I think if they want to brush this one aside, they're going to face a harder test at the 200-day mark later this summer if we still haven't seen significant movement on health care, taxes, immigration, and those other things that Republicans really want to get done.
And we should certainly not downplay the significance of getting Neil Gorsuch onto the Supreme
Absolutely.
Court. It is a huge, huge win for the Trump administration and Republicans in general. So, there has been progress, and so we'll have to see how it plays out within the next, how many days? Like 10 days, right? 9 days. Yep. 9 days to go. Ed O'Keefe at The Washington Post. As always, my friend, thank you very much. Have a nice weekend.
You too. Take care.